Time doesn't erase murder. It just hides it better. They said the case was closed. They said no one was watching. But someone always is. This is Santana True Crime.
Welcome to Santana True Crime. Tonight, I've got two special guests with me. I've got author Maria DiLorenzo with me, as well as author and serial killer expert Bill Kimberlin. Bill and Maria, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks again.
Yes,
So
thank
Bill,
you.
let me not forget, we've got your book, Watch Me Die, which talks about would you say the death row experience would be an accurate portrayal of that?
Yeah, I would say so, just based on my experience with witnessing multiple executions, what really happens throughout an execution, my interaction on death row. So it's a firsthand experience of walking somebody through what death row is really like, all the way through the stages of being executed.
And it's a fascinating book, and you're a fascinating person, because not only have you experienced actually witnessing an execution and sitting with people for their last meals and having these in-depth conversations one-on-one, but along the lines, you also obtained a vast amount of death row art.
Yes, so probably well over 3,000 pieces by now. I mean, it comes all the time. Different forms of art. I mean, some you call it art, paintings, drawings, wooden, models, airplanes, everything. But then, next thing you know, they're sending me uniforms and shoes. I got pairs of shoes coming this week, and all their prison IDs and their MP3 players and typewriters. So they just send me stuff all the time.
So we're going to get into that in a little bit, but first I want to make sure that I give Maria a plug. Maria's book, Confessions of the Green River Killer, is going to be out July 21st. It's available for pre-order now on Amazon, and I believe you can get that at other outlets as well.
I think it's wherever books are sold.
Yes, wherever books are sold. And Maria, one of the most unique things about you that I love is you're probably one of the few people that Gary Ridgway has said, "I love you" to.
Oh my gosh. I guess. Yeah.
That's the title that you've just got that you earned. And
I guess I just have to.
You have to own it.
I have to own it.
No, but on a serious note, Maria has spent a lot of time with in-depth conversations with Gary Ridgway, to the point that he was calling her about every day. I don't want to spoil the book, but you've got to pick that up anywhere where books are sold. And one of those stories is when he finally told you, "I love you." You're going to have to read about that. But Maria,
I did not reciprocate, just to be clear. It was not reciprocal at all.
You know what? They're going to have to get the book and find out. So let's get this thing started. So Bill, as I mentioned before, the link between you is you both had correspondence with people on death row. Maria, I know that you've also had conversations or correspondence with BTK, the Happy Face Killer, and some other people on death row. And so I think that that's an experience that a lot of people have not had. I know that people quite frequently try to reach out to serial killers or people on death row, and they just don't respond. And it seems like the two of you have been successful in that. So I wanted to get some firsthand experience on that. Maria, do you want to start us out with, how did you get into this? When was the first time that you wrote to someone on death row, and when did you get a response? And why was that something that you wanted to pursue?
Okay, so are you asking why? So death row.
I asked a lot of questions. Sorry about
that. That was a lot in one. But so death row specifically, or just in general writing to people in
You know what?
prison.
We'll say in general, writing to people in prison.
Okay. So initially, I started doing this in 2011. There was a killing spree, I guess you would call it, that happened close to where I grew up in Brooklyn. And I became basically just like obsessed with this story, just wanting to know why, right? Like really trying to search for the answers, why somebody would do, because I mean, the man who did it, his name was Maxim Gelman. At the time, he was like 22, 23 years old, and he had killed 4 people within the course of 28 hours, injured, multiple other people, stabbing them, carjacking them through the night as a way to get away. And then, this very dramatic arrest happened in Times Square. He tried to actually hijack the train, which so crazy.
How did that work out for him?
It did not work out. There was actually a cop in the conductor's cab. So the cop ended up coming out as, he actually took a hostage. He stabbed this man on the train, and the cop at that point disarmed him and he was arrested. It was very dramatic. So when this happened, I had just finished graduate school. I just finished an MFA in creative writing, and I just couldn't get the story out of my head. So I ended up writing to him and really just seeking, I didn't know I was gonna write anything. It was just really kind of curious, like why somebody would do this. And over the course of a few years, I was able to build a rapport with him. And I ended up, I ended up writing a manuscript. Sadly, it didn't sell at the time. And that was really my, I guess, beginning, right? The beginning of true crime for me. And from there, in 2020, I ended up starting the website Beyond the Crime, because I realized I kind of had a knack for that. And, it's I guess a unique skill to have, if you want to call it a skill, but just being able to build rapport with people incarcerated. And I was always just curious to know why people do what they do. And if I had not pursued writing, it would have been psychology. That would have been like my second choice in terms of, what to study in school. And so in 2020, I started Beyond the Crime, and I just sent out a ton of letters to anyone who I thought had an interesting case. And of course, Ridgway was at the top of that list, especially since he was known to be, a recluse, right? I was not really anticipating a response. And then Cameron and I mean, we spoke about this the last time I was on here, but he did end up calling me, and I ended up corresponding with, a lot of different people over, several years. So BTK, Dennis Rader being one of them, Keith Jesperson, the happy face killer, who I'm still in contact with today. He actually called me a few days ago. So him, the Trailside Killer, David Carpenter, who is on death row. He's one of the inmates who I've spoken to on death row. Sean Great, he's also on death row in Ohio. So there have been people on death row, but that's not specifically what I was seeking out. It was just, anyone incarcerated for murder who wanted to share, whether, it was their entire story or just a fragment of their story. I was, just interested in hearing it and learning about it and really trying to gain a better understanding of the criminal mind. So
Dr. Bill, Maria mentioned building a rapport. I know that's something that you've been very successful at. Is there any tips for communicating with people on death row, or how do you go about that? Do you have a system in place that you do, or are you just you?
So before I get into that, I have to acknowledge Maria and the fact that I've been actually excited and dying to meet you on here for the first time, because some of the main names she's mentioned. Obviously, I have contacts with and of. So like Sean Great and I, we go way back, and I've seen him on death row, and I'm still dealing with him on some stuff. But the top three people that she had mentioned, um, as easy as it may sound that you get to build a rapport with them, you can lose it just as fast. So, for instance, I have the artwork and everything from Jesperson, but he hates my guts.
Does he really?
Yes. So
Why?
funny you should ask. So I have never purchased a single piece of art or a letter, and I do not sell. So that's the reason why I have thousands and thousands of pieces, because otherwise it would ruin my credibility going inside the prisons. On top of the fact that that's just my other way of gaining trust with them, and they reach out to me first. So Jesperson, friends of mine who actually he introduced them to, and they're getting married and everything else, gave me some of his artwork, and so I thought, I'll thank the guy for it, saying how nice he did it. Well, he was pissed because I never paid him for it, and he wanted me to send the art back. And then he was like, I want that art back. You don't deserve it, and I want my money. And I'm like, buddy, that just is not going to happen. Sucks to be you, but it's not going to happen. So since then, somebody else sent me another piece of his, so just to piss him off. But and then Dennis Rader, who I had spoken to at length over and over, he signed all of his rights over to me for all of his artwork and everything. He's very obsessive compulsive and all that. But he had given me a code name of Dr. Will instead of Dr. Bill, which is still, I can't figure that one out to this day. And I was supposed to refer to him as Cancer Pisces. And so, fast forward to sometimes you'll see some of my artwork posted on social media and everything. And years ago when I had posted something, and I never post their names because I don't like to glorify them or glamorize them. So I posted something of Raiders, and somebody must have recognized it. And they're like, hey, is that BTK's? I'm like, yeah, it's BTK, Dennis Rader. And that's all I said. Well, they always have people on the outside monitoring everything. So he had found out that I referred to him as BTK instead of Cancer Pisces. He put me in carbon freeze. So I'm not allowed to talk to him until he says so again. And then you mentioned Gary Ridgway, who I've always found fascinating. I never had written him because at the time I stayed with, and this was even before Dennis Rader, that I stuck to death row, my area of expertise. And I thought, man, I'd always like to have talked to him. And somehow he must have gotten my name and address. And he had sent me a letter probably about 3 or 4 years ago, a couple of them, saying that, he's getting older now. He doesn't really like to write as much, but, he heard about me and appreciate it and sent me a bunch of stuff on the Seventh-day Adventist and, all kinds of, it was a nice letter. And I wrote him back thanking him, but I then again never heard back from him. So, yeah.
That's usually his introduction, that it's kind of like a generic thing that he does when he first starts, and he sends it to people that he thinks that they might be decent, or because I've actually talked to him about it.
Okay, that's great.
He thinks, they might be decent. So he'll send out kind of this generic kind of package of, a letter and then a bunch of Seventh-day Adventist information. But then most of the time he'll just stop there and he'll be like, well, they have something from me. And he kind of thought he was I guess doing something, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think he ever thinks, oh, I'm doing a nice thing, but I think, he feels they're satisfied, and maybe, they'll, because he would always complain he gets so much mail, and
Sure.
and it was so hard to keep track of. And he even had these third party people in Michigan that would handle his mail for him. But then, it was only a very small group of people that he would actually keep up with the communication. I know I was in that group for a while, obviously his family, and there were a couple other people that I knew of that, he would write to. But I know he typically didn't, writing letters, it took a long time for him to even send me a letter. He started with phone calls first. I had gotten that intro letter, and then he had just started calling me, and I would say it took a few months, and then he finally started writing me, and he told me hey, okay, I'm gonna write you a letter. And he kind of made it clear that, he doesn't like when he finds out his stuff is sold, and, that really like bothers him. And because he had gotten burned a lot, and he told me about those experiences, which, I've never sold anything, like ever. I don't, it's not a market that I'm really interested in being a part of.
Right.
I do this. It's really for research. I'm not, a true crime murderabilia market person. I'm a writer at the end of the day. So,
and I share that same exact, and it's hard for people to understand that
Yeah.
because I could care less about anything they send me. I literally have 30, 40 envelopes I came up across not too long ago. I've never even opened, from two serial killers that have since passed, Jablonski and somebody else. So,
Oh, wow.
and I got sick and tired of Jablonski's stuff, so I went and saw him in person in San Quentin instead. It's just easier than trying to read his writing. But some of them, I mean, the higher profile ones, they will have you checked out, like you said Gary did with you. So they know everything about you pretty much ahead of time.
Yeah, I mean, BTK did that to me, and I kind of butted heads with him because he wanted my address. I use a PO box when I
Same here. However, they already know where you live. I will say that only because every so often I'll get stuff to show up at my condo, here in Florida, and I used to have it in Ohio the same way, and I still have a PO box to this day. And they know where your spouse works, where your kids go to school. They know. So when they ask me some of those most personal questions, I already know they know the answer to them. So they're just testing me to see if I really am that stand-up guy, and I'm going to be truthful. So I tell them everything, and that gets me onto death row and gets me off of death row alive. But there are some that are very, very, very exclusively in private. Scott Peterson, one of them, where I've spoken to him for the last 10, 11 years, every 2 weeks. And outside of his attorneys and family, I don't know if anybody that ever really has. So, and I have all of his stuff as well.
Yeah, I wrote to him once. He did respond to me, actually. I do have a letter from him, but, because of all of the court stuff, his appeal and everything, he had said, he wasn't able to provide an interview, and he just thanked me for the letter, and that was really it. It was kind of brief, but he did respond, which I thought that was
and I enjoy our communication because he does keep me updated on all of his motions that the team is filing and things like that. And I don't post any of it. I don't at some point I would like to write about him in his own words, I guess, when everything's all said and done. But I keep most of it all hush hush, to a sense where I don't feel like getting subpoenaed or my letters being subpoenaed out there by the prosecution or the defense. So
I don't blame you. I mean, before like now that like my book is going to be out in the world, like no one knew except like people in my very close circle that I was even doing this with Gary. I mean, I never posted about it. I was really just like working in silence for like 5 years. And, now I'm, obviously talking about it because I have something now to show for it. But all that time, I mean, no one knew I was corresponding with him, which, I think it's better to, sometimes just keep stuff quiet until time is right.
Otherwise, people will poach and try to damage you. That's happened to me before, where people will get jealous. Like say Kimberlin's like, I'm jealous because Maria's writing Gary Ridgway. So before a book comes out, I'm going to write him and say, hey, whatever you're telling her, she's telling everybody. She's telling the whole world. And then he stops talking to her. So the less you say, kind of like the way I get the information from them, the less I ask them, the more they tell me. So
exactly. I mean, at this point, I don't care. I mean, I'm not, I'm no longer communicating with him. He's quite ill. I mean, he's not.
He's on that bingo chart, I think, of this year of dying.
You know what? He's been sick. This has been going on since 2022. And I mean, he's lasted this long, so I really don't know.
And Rader's looking really bad too.
Say again?
Dennis Rader's looking really real too.
Is he?
how
Oh
do
yeah.
y'all deal with that? Like with Maria, when he does die, is that something that it's just okay, Gary's dead? Do you
No, I
acknowledge
mean,
that? Do you reach out to his family?
I don't
Does
know.
that affect you in any way? I know that Bill, you've sat with these people and literally watched them die. Does that have any, are you completely detached from that?
Yes. So when they die, my folder is that folder is closed. That research on that person is done. I had two to die last year. One I was supposed to witness execution. He died before that, and he had chosen the electric chair, and it came as a shock. But I mean, just yeah, yeah. Um,
No, you didn't mean that pun.
yeah, I know. um, but no, I
Oh,
mean it's. I mean there are a number of like I have I think 7 more executions I've been asked to attend. One more I think, or one coming up this year I believe in Arkansas. Um, but no, I mean I don't. Some of them have once they die they're sending me their ashes and all that stuff.
wow.
So I mean I have no. Listen, it sounds really horrible, but I have no attachment to them whatsoever. They are a research subject to me. It just so happens that some of them have been in my wheelhouse for 20 years now because of them. I still have the same very first one on death row I ever started with. So it's. But I will say, once the filming and everything's done, my writing and that's done, when I will have no problem getting rid of everything and walking away from it. So
So when you go and witness an execution, is anyone else present, or is it just you, or how does that
so,
work?
so when I go, like if I have the last meal with them or whatever, it's before they transfer them from one institution to the death house. When I get there that morning of the execution, about 5 in the morning, a lot of times I'll get to go to the death cell and visit with them if they requested me to. That's usually where I don't say anything at all because there's 3 guards standing behind you at all times and one transcribing every single word that's being said, every movement being made. So they're in like a Hannibal Lecter style, a cell where it's all visible. They have a bed, a toilet sink, and a little tiny writing desk. And if they get up, brush their teeth 3 times a day, that's all transcribed in there. So I don't like any of my words written down like that.
Mhm.
And then when time for the execution arrives and we're led over to the death chamber, there's 3 of us on his side, and then typically 3 or sometimes maybe 4 or 5 on the witnesses side, depending on how many victims there were. But it's usually myself, the spiritual advisor to the individual, and their attorney.
Wow.
So in the debriefing room and the briefing room where we're at for hours before and then after, they have the legal team in there. So there may be 4 or 5 attorneys where, in TV and the movies are always, shuffling papers, filing last minute appeals and all that. But I've never had that experience. They're sitting around talking about what they had for dinner last night, where they're going tonight. They don't even mention,
Wow.
the defendant. So it's and I don't talk to them. I try not to, anyways. I just I observe. I write down everything. They get very inquisitive, want to know what I'm writing. I just say, stuff. I'm very standoffish because I just don't want that to bias anything that I, write down.
So, what is your purpose for going to witness these executions? Is it curiosity of like the methods or how people behave up until their last moments? I mean, so you're not really interacting with them?
So I'm not interacting with the attorneys. I am with the
Oh,
inmates.
oh,
So
okay, okay.
so the attorneys would prefer me not to be there.
Right, of
The
course.
wardens, they don't want me there. Nobody really wants me there other than the defendant.
Okay.
However, the reason I do it is for the very reasons we're discussing this right now, because most people don't know what really goes on because
Mhm.
of the lack of transparency.
Right.
So it's very rare that and you have to realize that my participation in an execution is completely different from anybody else's. I'm the only one there that doesn't have a duty to perform or a job to perform, meaning everybody on that execution team has to do something. Uh, everybody on the defense side, whether it's a spiritual advisor, they're in charge of, you know, giving them their last rites, or they're advising them on their spirituality, whatever. The attorneys are there to make sure everything goes right or save their life. On the other side of the witnesses are the, you know, the prosecution that brought that person there, the families that have been, you know, impacted by that individual, you know, firsthand. And then there's the reporters behind me. They have to write on everything that takes place. Everybody has a place there. I'm the only 100% neutral person. I've never had that person harm me, anybody in my family. I don't report to him, his team, nobody. So, you know, it's a very unique position for me, at least, to be in.
And that's what's good about your book, is it brings to light a lot of things that just are not brought up in the media, in the nitty gritty stories and facts that are not public, like the execution team are not medical professionals, and the problems that they've had putting in IVs and things that are just really show the lack of training and expertise in the medical field. Like when you spend so much time trying to connect an IV that the guy has to go to the bathroom because you did get in one IV and you pumped a bunch of saline solution into him.
Yeah, I mean, he literally got up off the table to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, and those are the types of stories that are in his book, and why it's important to read. And I know that you've talked about this before too, where when we're looking at different methods of execution, and I think that people have a flawed version of that too, because they make it seem like, oh, this person is just going to go to sleep, or, oh, they don't see the complex nature of lethal injection, where you can't even get the drugs anymore in a lot of states. And so they're having to come up with these other types of executions. Like, I believe you went to or you're about to go to one where they're using nitrogen gas.
Right. Nitrogen hypoxia.
Correct. What state is that?
Arkansas.
Oh, wow.
So it's, yeah, I mean, every state, you know, you would think in 2026, you know, we would try to be more proactive on trying to figure out maybe to abolish the death penalty, or figure out, you know, different ways of eliminating it, I guess. But instead, we're still coming up with new methods. So
is that your stance then, that you oppose the death penalty, and that's part of like the reason that you do this work?
No. So again, I'm really neutral in the sense of I don't blame the families for wanting to see this person get executed for the horrific crimes that they did. That being said, I want to educate the families on making sure you know what you ask for. And sometimes you have to be very careful what you ask for. Mm-hmm. So when they are counseled by the state, the prosecutor, because remember that only the prosecution can determine if that person is going to be facing the death penalty or not. So if they don't file it under a capital offense, then it just doesn't happen. Typically, they'll go to the family and want to request, you know, if they're okay with that. Mm-hmm. But they'll sell it to them in such a way that, listen, this person is going to go to death row for a long time probably, but they're going to be locked down 23 hours a day, sunlight pumped in 1 hour a day. You know, they're going to rot in there, and they're going to be miserable until such time they're executed. And nothing could be further from the truth. Absolutely nothing. In fact, if I was counseling the families that were going to trial because somebody killed one of their family members, I would strongly suggest them not to go for the death penalty, because chances are they will be dead themselves before they ever see this person executed.
Yeah, I mean, look at David Carpenter. He's been on death row since 1980.
I have one in Florida that's been on for 42, 43 years.
That's insane. I mean, when he told me that, and David Carpenter is like, I think he's like 95, 96, mm-hmm. right? He's been on death row longer than I've been alive. Like, I can't even wrap my head around that.
You know what's odd about that too is when the state makes these efforts to essentially keep him alive. Like when Joseph Naso had a heart attack, and they, instead of like, oh, okay, the guy's on death row, let's let him die. It's, oh, we're going to have open heart surgery instead and keep him alive. That way we can be the one that may
Right.
execute him. That just seemed odd to me.
The states will exercise every possibility they can to keep them alive in order to kill them. And that's when you get into the ethical dilemmas from the medical standpoint, where if you or I or our parents or whomever can't afford certain care on the outside, where they need cancer treatment, chemo, radiation, they need MRIs all the time, this and that, but they can't really afford it. Yet somebody on death row, they're getting all of that treatment, every bit of it. They're getting the psychotropic medications for their mental health illnesses. They're getting them for depression, anxiety. They're getting everything in order to keep them alive so that the state can put them to death. So ethically, you have to, we need to address that at some point as well. But I mean, I also had a guy who survived an execution, Romel Broom, in Ohio. They ran out of drugs because they missed all the veins.
Wow.
And the governor finally had to call it, and they had to intervene. The doctor, they came in and took care of him and sent him to the hospital, did everything they could. So then the big dilemma was, okay, now what happens? Because he lived through his execution. You had this side over here saying, well, he can't be put to death again. It's the state's fault, so he should get life. And Supreme Court ruled that, listen, the state is supposed to put him to death. They failed at it the first time, but that doesn't exclude him from having that readministered. So before they were able to reschedule it, then he died of COVID.
Oh wow.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, it's and you're talking maybe that was what 2022, 23. In this day and age, they still can't get it right. So.
Yeah, I mean, because it comes down to the drugs that they're using, right? Isn't that part of it?
So since
they're using, what is it, like a cheaper generic version of it that's causing like botched executions?
So typically what the problem is there's no medical professional involved whatsoever. So you can't have a nurse, you can't have a doctor because of the oath that they take. So they use like prison EMTs to try to, hit the veins properly. On top of that, without having an anesthesiologist or a medical professional involved to say how much, how many milligrams of, sodium pentothal you need, or pancuronium bromide, or potassium chloride, those drugs wear off faster on some people, metabolize faster on others, things like that. So, the paralyzation agent wears off fast sometimes. So I've witnessed them convulse and shake and everything else. But I've also seen them where they've been induced them with, sodium pentothal or, and then skip the paralyzation and go right to the potassium chloride, which gives them a heart attack. Boom, done. But again, the bigger picture is they're only trying to make lethal injection appear to be more humane for the witnesses only. That's it. They want us to think that was easy, so let's do it more often.
It's like smoke and mirrors type of.
Absolutely. In fact, I have literally the only death row protocol that's ever it's never been released. A friend of mine who was a judge ordered it to be released to him, and the Supreme Court did so in confidence. But then his belief was he's an elected official, public official. And when he received that document, which is about 500 pages, that became public record. So he gave it to me. And it's actually on display in Atlanta right now. But there's a page right in there that, because they go through everything, 500 pages worth of everything. And one of the pages says, if all else fails, call your surgeon and beg for forgiveness. So right in the protocol.
And that's what's so funny when people start bringing up firing squads, because they sound really brutal. And they are, in a way. But at the same time, you've got people that are at least trained to do that job, doing the job.
Right.
Like a qualified sniper or sharpshooter, as opposed to someone like me being handed I've gone through medical training. I've got some cool classes I went to, but I am not an EMT, and I would not be someone that you would want to put an IV in, or me putting the IV in.
Right.
How do they decide who's going to do that job?
So
And
I can say from my experience that it's really sad, but when the lethal injections would come up in Ohio, the guards would sign up. They'd put a sign up list by the time clock or whatever, and a lot of them would do it because of the overtime, and you get the next day off. So human life.
so you get the next day off if you administer the drugs in an execution, and
if you're on the execution team, correct. So
and that's the incentive.
correct. Human life day off, basically.
Would you sign up, Maria?
No, I would not. Definitely not. I actually oppose the death penalty. I there's not one case I could think of where I'm like, oh yeah, let's kill this person. I think life in prison is I think it's punishment enough. I think losing your freedom, right? I mean, that's one of the worst things. So
And you're not wrong. You're not wrong at all. And that's why I try to stay neutral. I would want people to make an educated decision on their opinion, not just based on, even if it's my book or anything. Don't take my word for it. Just it opens up the avenues for people to research a little bit more. But again, when we're trying to utilize method, we can't have universal health care in this country. We can't have universal education. We can't even have universal Social Security that's going to last. Yet we still are trying to figure out different ways to put people to death. And even so, you mentioned the firing squad, which is probably the most effective way to go, and the quickest. So you're dead within a minute. But even then, the states are different. So Utah, you have 5 shooters. 4 of them have live rounds. 1 of them has a blank. So there's 4 live rounds, 1 blank. Nobody knows who has the blank. They're 30-30s, 30 caliber, sharpshooters, right to the heart, dead. Fast forward to South Carolina, you have 3 sharpshooters, all 3 with live rounds, 30-06s. They have different rounds, different rifles, different number of them, and you still have to add that element of a human taking another human's life. So regardless of how, like I don't even know how many guns I own. I grew up hunting, and I probably have probably over 100 guns. But if I'm aiming at a human being, am I going to be that accurate? What's going through my mind? And if nothing's going through my mind as I squeeze that trigger, then there's probably something wrong with me as well. So
well, yeah, but I mean, that's also, a lot of the people who are in corrections, I mean, they do become, I think, desensitized, right? I mean, it's because of everything there. It's a hard job. I mean, right. And they're seeing a lot of stuff every day, but I don't know about, just the willingness to, want to take another person's life, like what that could suggest about a person, right? That like, are they eager to do it? Is it like that? Or is it just sort of like, oh, this is something I have to do, right? Another day at work. I don't.
It's bizarre when you think about it. I could never do it. This is so weird too. People ask me all the time if they could attend an execution with me. And the obvious answer is no. But I really want to know, like, why? Why did I understand my curiosity from an educational standpoint and learning from them and getting to know these individuals. But for anybody wanting to come off the street and say, I'll juice them, I'll pull the trigger, I'll gas them, I'll do it. And I'm thinking, man, I don't know if you really know what's going on in the reality of it. So
do you think they're just running their mouth for the most part? Or I know with police work, and I know firemen are like this as well. I was a cop for close to 20 years. And especially when you first started, if there was a messed up murder scene, we used to call it touching the bear, meaning that everyone wanted to go and see it. And it was like someone's decapitated. Oh, guys are heading towards it. And Bill, maybe you can explain this of why police officers are so messed up, but you do get extremely desensitized. And I know this is across all generations. When I was in the academy, we had detectives come in who were teaching crime scene management, and they had their Polaroid collection, and they had a box of Polaroid pictures that they would pass around. And one of the ones I remembered was a guy that had lopped another person's head off and put it on a coffee table. And so, like, that was a Polaroid that he was passing around. And this detective, who's now retired, had kept it for years and years. So I do think that in that profession, and I'm sure that you can include detention officers, that after you've seen so much, you almost have an urge to see more. But taking another life, I do think, is a different level.
So,
But wait, like, is it like, because, I actually, like, I've written on, like, the topic of, like, the culture within corrections, right? And, like, a lot of them collectively believe that the people who are incarcerated, they do deserve punishment. So do they feel that on some level that they're doing the right thing, right? Just because that there's, like, collectively, right? There's collectively this, like, mindset, right? This, like, I feel like a lot of them have, like, a similar, like, value system that, oh, they're pieces of shit, and, like, we're here to, kind of act as, like, the gatekeepers in a sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that would be a good way to process it and to rationalize your behavior and why you think the way you do and want to do the things that you want to do.
You have everything from a morbid curiosity aspect of it to the humanistic side. So for police officers, I can't think of a more difficult profession to be in this day and age. I just couldn't. Simply because as a police officer, they are generally looked down upon based on a few bad actors or actions, when the general public doesn't realize that throughout the day you have to be a mental health expert, a social worker, you have to a traffic guard, basically help the kids do whatever you can. There's so much social activity going on, kindness, fairness, that people don't focus on. They only focus on what's showing up on TikTok or social media or whoever has a camera out at that time. And that's what sells in the media. If you're out there and you stop your car to toss the football around with some kids or whatever like that, that's not going to make the news unless somebody's saying, oh yeah, there's our hard tax dollars at work guy playing around. So you're judged. Officers are judged way too harshly. So I think that also aids in their ability to become so desensitized so quickly, because there's so much expected out of them. On top of, they have to be treated at a higher expectation by their surroundings, their superiors, everything else. So you're expected to toe the line, not be human, but be humanistic to everybody else. And people fail all the time, every day. It's just the spotlight seems to really be shown on law enforcement, in my opinion. And I've never been in law enforcement, nor could I be.
Yeah, and when you were talking about, when I asked you earlier if it affected you to watch someone die, and then, if you had any type of emotional sensitivities towards that, that's something that I related to as well, because I've seen lots of people die, and lots of people who were shot and literally died right in front of me. And it sounds really cold, but there's only a few that ever affected me.
Right.
And that was younger children after I had a kid. And that was about it. And it was like one guy that he got into a really bad car wreck, and I had to explain to his brother why, he was essentially dead, and they were keeping him on life support until his family could come down. But other than that, it was, you know,
It's
you don't have any type of emotional, I don't even know a good word for it. You just don't, it sounds cold, but you just don't feel. You just go on to the next call.
You do, and that's an internal struggle that I have. I'll be honest with you, because when I say now inmates reach out to me because they've heard from me or from other inmates, on different death rows. So, like for instance, Scott Peterson, I never wrote to him. He wrote to me because other inmates said, "Hey, can we give him your address? He would like to talk to you. You're a stand-up guy, blah blah blah." So, when you start getting to know these individuals and other ones start reaching out to you, sometimes I'll open the letter. I'm like, this person only killed, 2 or 3 people. I don't have time for this. And you should never think that way, because one human life is way too many. But when you're dealing with somebody like Samuel Little, who killed 89, or Charles Ng, who killed 25, and you're constantly dealing with these individuals,
or yeah, I mean, Ridgway
49, I mean,
Yeah.
it's baffling.
Well, higher than that, I think.
Yeah,
it's higher than 49.
exactly. And I'm thinking, man, it's bizarre to have to try to explain to people that it just doesn't affect me in any way, shape, or form. Not to say that it won't later on in life, but as it stands right now, I don't. It's not a good feeling. It's just it's self-awareness of knowing that I am not the person to go to the family members, for their trauma my master's is in counseling, my doctor's in psychology, and I'm still not the person the family would want to talk to. Because how do I explain to the family, I'm meeting you for the first time, but I've spent 20 years with the guy that took your family members' lives, to try to learn from him a little bit more,
Mm.
So, it's a hard balance.
Yeah.
Well, and Maria, like you mentioned, you spent quite a long time talking to someone that murdered close to 100. Do you think that'd be for Ridgway?
I mean, the
What
number
do you
would.
think his real number is?
I don't know. I mean, the number would fluctuate, So, he told me 81 to 91. It could be that. It could be less. He told the police 71. Right. So I don't know. I think it's higher than 49. I would, just because of all, and, I don't just say that just because I actually conducted research and found there were so many cold cases that were similar to, cases that were confirmed. So that's the only reason I believe the number is higher. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm probably the odd one out that it does emotionally affect me, right? Like the whole experience of it, knowing what, in the case of Ridgway, knowing what he did, right? Obviously that, I find that impactful on, psychological, emotional level. And then also my own interactions with him, right? So I don't know. I feel like, maybe I'm the odd one out here.
No, I envy you.
You're normal. Congratulations.
Yeah, I don't think I'm normal.
No, I really
normal enough. Right.
I do envy that aspect of it because of the, that you have that ability to have empathy and emotions towards the victims, and you see Ridgway as a piece of crap and the things that he did. Where, I'm sitting across from these inmates, eating, drinking. There's no handcuffs. There's no shackles. We spent hours upon hours walking around, doing whatever, and I have to keep a straight face whenever they're telling me about the murders and the child rapes that they did,
Right.
because they're trying to elicit some kind of response,
Right. But I mean, I had to do that too. I mean, talking to these people, but I would say the aftermath, right? It's what I don't show them, right, in the moment. And then it's it affects me later. It's, then I don't sleep or, right. But in the moment, I'm able to just kind of go with the flow of the conversation, and whatever they're telling me, I try not really to react, I feel, but that doesn't mean later on it doesn't impact me in some way. And it's just the whole experience, right? Like knowing what he did, right? The victims, how, he's impacting me, right? Just by talking to him every day. But then it's also, I find it really sad that, not just him, I think anybody, right, who goes and commits murder or multiple murders, right, that, the people that they go and they do that at all, right? Like, I think there's something sad about that, right? The type of person who would do that and just how shallow and of an existence, right, that is. And I just find the whole thing, right? The whole thing is, sad and, from every single perspective, right? So maybe I'm like overly empathetic, but
I think that you're human, and I think that is one of the things that you see in your book, Confessions of the Green River Killer, is that you see that humanistic side. This is not someone that works for Dateline. When you're talking about Ridgway calling you for the first time, you're doing laundry and you've got socks in your hand. That's something that the average Joe can relate to. This wasn't a PR stint that someone arranged or something that you were prepared for and you had your laptop out.
Right.
And so that's what I think is special about you, as opposed to, honestly, I don't say this in a negative way, but another detective or even a psychologist like Bill is going to have a different point of view than you are.
Right.
And I think that the relationship that you built with him is going to be far different than a relationship that Bill, even though Bill is great at what he does, it's going to be different from what you were able to build.
Right. And I think that's part of the reason he spoke with me, right? He was so selective because he never wanted to talk to, sometimes he had no choice, right? Detectives would just show up and, ask him about cases. And that was part of his plea agreement, to like talk about other cases with them if need be. I also think he likes maybe that part of the attention and the cat and mouse and knowing, oh, they're still, pursuing me. I think, that did something for him. But then, a psychologist, he never really, wanted to talk to them, or, he would get mail from like all the TV networks, right? All those reporters, and he was never interested in any of it. So.
And say hypothetically, I spent just as much time with Gary as you did, face to face. He would probably tell you so much more than he would ever tell me, just because of my position as a psychology, a professor, researching it specifically for certain reasons, where he probably would open up to you so much more personal and let you in on his dark side, so to speak, where he'd be more guarded with somebody like me. So I think what you've done, I think you're amazing at what you've done. So
thank you. I think also being a woman, I think that has a big part, like someone with, like him anyway. And I think that's true for maybe a lot of them, especially, serial killers, just because there is that component of, most of their victims do happen to be women, right? So that plays a part in it.
And as long as it's the right woman. So what you've done, the way you're doing it, is you're trained very well anyways in writing, and you've been through the college experience. You know what to expect from the humanistic aspect of this person behind bars, where some of these women, they just go in with blonde hair, blue eyes, batting lashes, and they have absolutely no credentials behind their name whatsoever. They're just groupies that got invited in, and then they want to make themselves famous because they've spoken to a Charles Ng or a Manson or somebody like that. So totally different when you can actually sit down and write what this individual has shared with you that nobody else has ever been able to get him to do. So
right, yeah, and he knew I was a writer. I never kept that from him, right? Like from day one, I said I'm a writer. But the fact that I'm independent, I don't work for any network or corporation. I used to freelance for magazines, and he knew that too. But I never, I never took what conversations I had with him and, used it for that publication. He just, I guess he developed a trust over time, knowing that I wasn't going to do that. And, I told him I want to write a book. I didn't know at the time what that book looked like.
Sure.
I didn't know it was going to be a hybrid of, memoir, true crime. At the time, I thought it would just be some type of like authorized biography. And then it morphed into, realizing like my experience is also valuable here. So
over a longitudinal study, basically over a period of time, where you have some of these reporters, whether it's Dateline, 48 Hours, whatever you want to call it, they want to get in, get the story, and get out, and never have contact with the individual again. Where somebody like yourself, I know for me personally, I've spent decades with some of these guys and females, and you learn more and more and more about them without, and I don't put out articles or anything like that either, because I don't, at some point it'll all go in some type of a manuscript, but until then I'm still learning from them. That's why I keep every single thing they send me. And but it's an investment of time, and that's what a lot of people don't get. They want to get in, get a story, make it big, and get out. And you have to mesh yourself with this culture sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, you really have to build a rapport. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And a lot of the people who work for these networks, like, they're not willing to do that, or like, they don't care enough to do that. And, I find that to be, that's important. That's important in order to get this type of story, right? And when I'm invested in the way that I was, with Ridgway, and even some others, like I wrote shorter stuff, like Jesperson at one point, I was in pretty close communication with him, and we ended up, working on, it was really the Tanya Bennett case. It was, that one specifically. But yeah, I mean, it does take up so much time. I mean, with Ridgway, I was talking to him. I mean, at the time, he was allowed out for, it was supposed to be an hour. Sometimes it would be longer just because it was during COVID. And I think like they were just short staffed. And then there were times like he thought that they forgot him out there. They're like, they just started like, handing out food trays, and he's like, well, I'm still out here, so it's like, all right. We got to talk for longer. Like I remember having one phone call with him that was about like, probably like 5 hours. Like they just forgot him like in the yard, and no one said anything, right? So like it's a lot of time though. Like that's the point, right? Like hours of conversation, and then trying to process everything, right? And trying to make sense of everything that he was telling me. And it's a lot. It takes a toll, I think.
It does. And you have to learn how to balance it. I'll look at my phone real quick today, because I know I ignored, I'm going to see how many calls from death row just today alone. And that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 of them from Ohio's death row today alone.
Yeah.
And I have
incredible
598 voicemails from different death rows still on here, from California, Arkansas, Florida, Ohio, Washington. I mean, it's just,
yeah, it takes a toll. I mean, Gelman called me today out of nowhere. I didn't so like even like when you don't talk to them for a long time, like they'll.
Who called you today?
Max Gelman. He was the one I told you about. He went on the killing spree.
Oh,
like,
yes.
I haven't spoken to him in months, and
you just never know. That's the thing. They'll call. Like we were filming last week on a serial killer up in Jacksonville. And I had him specifically I wanted him to call me at a certain time when we were, out with NCIS looking and stuff. And, my phone rings, 20 minutes early. And so I answer it on camera, totally different inmate. I'm like, dude, I'm waiting. Can you help a brother out? I'm waiting for a different phone call. And, they just want to talk. So you never know who you're going to.
You never know.
No.
And you know what? It's all on their schedule, because they really have no choice. It's like, this is when they can call, and that's it. And, with Ridgway, and because of the time difference too, right? Depending on where you live and everything. So that also, factors into it. And it's it does it takes up a lot of time. It's a lot of energy. It's costly. Even I think people don't realize some of the facilities now have free calls, which is great. New York is one of them. New York now has free calls, but like the calls in Washington and Oregon, like it could add up,
Yeah.
and even if like they're using their free calls, or if they it's still it's costly, it's time consuming, it takes a lot of energy. It basically kind of like takes over your whole life. Like I've definitely like have been like driving or in the supermarket, and it's like, oh, I'm getting a call, and like I run out to go take it, right? Like it's just you really have to be invested if you.
And that does include the emails from different servers, and then the letters on top
The
of
letters on top of it. Yeah.
It's yeah, I mean, it is very, very time consuming on top of, and again, with the time difference, my phone will ring at midnight sometimes, and it's California at 9 o'clock. I'm like,
Yes.
And I rarely ever answer unless I have my recorder around or I'm on camera. I'm not answering it, and and I prefer handwritten or typed letters over emails, but some of them, the prisons have changed over the years so much, where you used to be able to send envelopes and stamps and everything else. Now you have to send them. Like California is my favorite one, they mail, because they get it directly. So if I'm writing Scott, if I need to send him 20 stamps, you just put them in an envelope and send it to him. He gets them. Where you can't do that in any other prison. In other states, most of them, like even in Florida, I'll go to death row in Florida, but if I write somebody in death row, I have to send the letter to Tampa. They scan it.
Oh yeah.
Ohio's the same way now.
Ohio is the same way. Yeah. But Washington is not. I know, like he would get my letters directly.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with Jesperson in Oregon. I think there's no like third party, but I know there was another state. I want to say either Iowa maybe, where they had like it went to like Vegas first, like it went to, right, like
it's so bizarre.
Yeah.
And so then that takes away a lot of the personal part of it.
Exactly.
So when I started 20 years ago, when they were sneaking me a lot of crime scene photos, or I could send them maps in and have them draw where certain areas are. Now it's everything's intercepted. So
well, let's talk about some of the stuff that wasn't intercepted. And Bill, you provided me with some of the artwork. I know that you've got several thousand pieces, but we were talking about BTK earlier, and these are actually some of his drawings, right?
Yeah. So some of those there, I mean, he would send me all kinds of stuff. There's probably about 6 or 8 pieces up in Atlanta right now too on display.
Can you tell people of what you're referring to?
There's the serial killer world exhibit that's it came over from Europe, and they opened it up for the first time ever over in the United States in Atlanta. So they contracted with me because I have so much stuff to see if I would loan them some pieces. And after meeting with them and vetting with them to make sure that they were not glorifying or glamorizing any of the killers, and we could lay down some ground rules, especially when it came to acknowledging the victims and all that. They were so above and beyond agreeable to that, and it's such a I was shocked, put it that way. 27,000 square feet up there, 42 different rooms, 150 different serial killers, 25 different countries. I was amazed at when I went up there just to deliver my stuff, because I wasn't even sure I was going to hand it over to them. And then I realized that the owners that live in Italy, and that they own the body exhibit and everything else. So they sunk over $1 million into the exhibit in Atlanta alone, and it goes to Chicago next. So it's going to be it's going to be in the United States for about 3 or 5 years before it goes to Asia next. So they know what they're doing. So I think I gave them maybe 200 or 300 pieces so that they could display everything from death row uniforms to shoes to artwork, letters, you name it. So, and I think it's going to be in Atlanta until the end of April. Then it goes to Chicago, I believe, next. So.
Is it the same as the one in New York? Because New York is opening up.
Yeah, no,
Different.
totally different. So when they came over, then some other people wanted to jump on this bandwagon, open one up in like New York or Myrtle Beach or this or that.
Mhm.
Those are more like I call them sideshows, only because I have never been to a serial killer exhibit or museum. I'm like you. I'm not really big into the true crime stuff.
Yeah.
If I'm watching anything on TV, it's like Bigfoot stuff like that. I'm really weird. But going to that exhibit and seeing the interacting aspect of it, where they have the forensic rooms, teaching you from showing you the equipment they started out with back in the 1800s up to now. The interactive aspects where you can find out where you are ranked on the test for being a psychopath or a sociopath. I mean, there's just so much interacting. It takes like 4 hours to get through it. And just seeing how well they present this stuff without glorifying anyone. So they were so concerned about it opening up in Atlanta that they wouldn't even do anything with Wayne Williams because of that being such a controversial case. Even to this day, there's a lot of questions whether he's the right one or not, and the families are still living right there, so they weren't going to do anything to bring him up to damage that community anymore. So I mean, they're very good at it. So, but they're all over in Europe, so our communication, which is a lot, but I'm lucky to speak English, let alone the ones that live in France and the ones that live in Rome and Venice. So they'll send me all these texts and emails. I'm like, what the hell are you trying to say? Can you at least translate? Sorry, forgot you're dumb American. So, but yeah, it's a really cool exhibit for people to see, to learn. I learned so much stuff because I never really studied just serial killers, and but you start out with H.H. Holmes and you go all the way through. So.
And I didn't realize it was such a big thing, the
Oh my
art
God, me
aspect
either.
of it.
I had no
until
idea
I met you.
There is a huge market out there. People, so like Maria's sitting on a gold mine alone with her communications with Gary. Like if she's like, I don't think I want to write anymore. If you have 100 letters or 150 letters on what you have or whatever, you could put each one up for $1,000.
Oh, I could. I know. I would never do that though.
I know. Believe me, I
have.
I'll take $100,000.
Like I have like a lot. I have a huge like binder of his letters, and then I have so much. I have a lot from Ted Kaczynski too.
So these are binders just of Scott Peterson, and starting on the third one, and luckily my wife takes care of them all because I just throw everything over to the side. This one goes from 2016 to 21, 22 to 26, and she got to start on another one because they're just piled up here, and nobody else has them. So I've had people offer me, $500, $600, $700 each letter.
So I don't know if you would answer this, and it's okay if you don't want to, Bill, but just curious. Do you think Scott's innocent?
So I will say this, that I have known him now for, over a decade and spoken with him frequently and gotten to know him personally. And over this time period, he has never once admitted that he's killed Lacey or Connor. But that being said, he's never denied it.
Yeah.
Okay. So does he not talk about it then? Is that?
No, you have to prompt these individuals and lead into it.
Right, of course.
So there for a while, our communication was so far off from the case itself. And it's not like you can just say, hey, did you do it or not? Or, so you have to, it's a game of chess. So one of my moves one time was, I wrote him, I'm like, hey, word is on the street that you and Amber Fry are still talking. Now, it's never been a word on the street. I made that up totally, just pulled out of my ass just to see what his response would be and to see if he was, in fact. And he was like, I haven't talked to that bitch since, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So that, clarified that right away. He does tell me what they're testing all the time, DNA wise. what they're hoping for. He doesn't, he's not the kind to sit there and say, yeah, we got this made. He is very grounded in the fact that, the odds are stacked against him, but he still is getting a shot at it. So we talk about a lot of the appeals process and the original trial with Mark Garagos and things like that. I may or may not have a letter of his, like, OJ if I did it kind of thing, but that'll be.
I mean, honestly, I could see both sides of the coin with his case. The fact that there was a robbery that occurred across the street, there was the issue with the dog, like all of that is very, suspicious.
Yeah. So, I mean, I am of the belief that if there's ever any question of any doubt in any evidence, they should test it. They should present it. They should do all of that. Again, the states are very, in my opinion, and it's a strong word to use, but I will say corrupt when it comes to making sure that they will fight tooth and nail the entire legal system, not to retest evidence, represent it, or anything along those lines, because they have become so invested in it. So when somebody asks me, if he's guilty or would he be guilty, not guilty, that's a toss up. Based
I could say 50-50. I really can, but because I could see 50-50, I think he does deserve a chance to go back to court, right? And if there is DNA that needs to be tested, then that should happen.
Without a doubt.
Because then, right, like, wasn't his case, I mean, it's been so long since I followed it, but a lot of the reason why he was convicted was circumstantial. Am I right?
Correct. So a lot of circumstance, and when you put all those pieces together, obviously it shows that a reasonable person at that time would find him guilty. But then when Garagos and them were still getting evidence delivered to them during the phase of the trial where the jury's deliberating, to me that's horrible when it comes to the legal system itself. And then again, there's the guilty, not guilty is one thing. Innocent or not is another. Whole different ballgame. So, but I do think that based on what I've been told and seen in research, if the state is so sure of it, then they should just let him have a new trial.
All right.
Well, and the technology has changed. Since
absolutely.
his last trial.
You had the burned out van, with the mattress. That would bring that into play with the DNA on that mattress. The fact that there was another pregnant woman that was found, deceased as well in that same time frame. There's just a lot of different aspects that should have been brought out more. But I definitely do not want to play, armchair quarterback to the detectives and everybody else that worked on that case, firsthand knowledge of it all, because we're only privileged to get whatever the media gives us. And, I go a little bit further and I'm privileged to get the information that the defendant himself gives me. But, there's three sides to every story, his, hers, and the truth. So, I just take everything and I collect it all and try not to make any type of decision or judgment until I have it all. So.
Yeah. I do think he deserves at least the opportunity to get back into court. So.
I look at it this way: if people are so convinced that Eric and Lyle Menendez should be freed after blowing the heads off of their own parents and going back out, reloading, going back in, regardless of whether they were abused or not. Again, that's I know a lot of people that have been abused in their life and haven't done that. If they think that they should be released, then how is it so difficult for somebody to say, let's give him a retrial?
Exactly. Yeah, I think people just jumped on a bandwagon with him. And I think it was like when it came out that he had cheated and Amber Fry, like all of that, I think people began to just see him like he has to be guilty because look at this other horrible thing that he has done, right? Which, I mean, it is terrible. I mean, okay, like that part's true. He cheated on his wife, right? But does that necessarily make him a murderer? And I don't know, right? Like, and now all this other stuff is coming up. So, you know, a cheater, a murderer, two very different things, right?
Absolutely. And the timing couldn't have been any worse for him because it was the holidays, and then you had court TV and Nancy Grace and all of them just blowing it up. So, you know, he was tried in the court of public opinion way before.
Oh yeah, 100%. And then that juror who just, you know, she had her own kind of mission, right, to get revenge on men, right? It was.
And that's like that's a whole nother episode of how now it seems like these major cases, everyone's already made up their mind before court actually even happens.
Right.
You know, you saw that with Karen Reed, for example, or, you know, you could name any case that's coming out in modern day. It's on court TV. It's on YouTube. People are already forming their opinion. And like you're saying, Maria, I mean, something that's circumstantial, that's a very weak case. And I do think that, and this kind of ties into people that are on death row, that if we're saying that we're going to continue with death row, we're going to continue killing people, and there's these older cases that have evidence that have not been tested, I think that it absolutely is an obligation of the state to fork up the money to send that to a good lab to be tested, like Othram.
Yes, 100%. And even if there's no case involved, like no appeal happening, I still think there are cold cases that they deserve to be, you know, looked into, right? I mean, Cameron, you and I spoke the last time, right? Of, like those cold cases that, you know, Gary could be responsible for, and no one seems to.
And that blows me away that you've got these cases that we know. And I say this on every show, I feel like, that with people that are serial killers and not just killing more than 4 or whatever the definition is, I'm talking about people like Gary or Ted Bundy, people that are killing more than 20. I'll put it that way. We don't know what their real number is. I doubt that Gary's is 49 or whatever he claims or what he was convicted of. And I'm sure that it probably is closer to 80, like we were saying before. But there seems to just be this lack of drive in law enforcement that after someone is convicted, we've stopped looking at these cases, where it should be the opposite.
Right.
It should be like, hey, let's go talk with Maria. She's had this close relationship with him. Let's find out if he's confided in her about other crimes that he's committed, and especially the notes and whatnot. And I know you described in your book where he told you about a box of evidence that he had buried in a park. It's like, holy shit. If you're a law enforcement officer and you hear that, I hope you go grab your shovel and, you know, come pick you up and start digging.
Right. But the reality was I went out there by I had a friend with me, and, you know, we like dug up half a park. But I mean, they, from what I understand, they eventually went and spoke to him about that, but it was inconclusive. I don't know if he was being truthful with them. It's like he told me about it, and, you know, I don't think he ever wanted to tell them about it. At least that's what he would tell me, right? He didn't want law enforcement to know, and, you know, this was something he wanted me to go and find out, and he was kind of giving me like these instructions. But then, you know, down the line, when I was no longer in communication with him, and when I did speak to law enforcement about it, the original members of the Green River Task Force, they believed, right, that this thing existed. And it seemed like they wanted to find it, but then it was like the people in charge currently had a lot of doubts, and, you know, they just didn't seem to really do much about it until I believe when they brought him back to Seattle in 2024, right, they brought him on that little road trip. And meanwhile, at this point, he's in a wheelchair. I mean, if you look at his mugshot that they released, right, like he's lying in bed, right? So I don't know how effective that road trip actually was or where he could really go, right, in the condition that he's in. But supposedly the topic of the safe or box, whatever you want to call it, that he buried, it did come up. And, he was giving them a lot of BS, right? And, like, oh, maybe it's here, maybe it's there, right? He wasn't, really giving them much of anything, which doesn't surprise me. I feel like that's what he does, right? It's all like a cat and mouse game with him at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So, but I still think it's worth it if, they gave more attention to it. And, I have a list that I compiled of possibly 17 parks that I believe where it could possibly be, right? If they have equipment and tools and, they have all these resources that I don't have, right? Like, why not go and conduct a better search? Like, why not go to all of them and just see if you could find anything?
Right.
I can tell you why, because they were prostitutes, most likely. The law enforcement has egos and they don't want outsiders to trample on anything and they don't want anything unsolved on their watch.
Right.
And I've been told that, listen, I've been dealing with that even last week when we had 16 agents from 3 different states to finally converge on one site from a serial killer, which, we excavated and didn't exactly find what we were hoping to find, but it was, they chose one site, whatever we told them to do. They wouldn't do the other 2. And they're like, hey, it happens. So, and they're done with it. And my guy is like, what the hell's their problem? Those bodies are there. He's so adamant because it's his word. And I can tell you that I have spoken to no law enforcement whatsoever here in Florida. Even last week when, 16 different agents from NCIS, because it was on military base, from Camp Lejeune, the Marines up in Camp Lejeune came down, Jacksonville Naval, which was already there, and then CID from Georgia came down to meet with and have a training exercise, and they still wouldn't even acknowledge me. And it was, but for me bringing them there. So.
But what's interesting? They won't acknowledge it, but yet they'll leave the cases open. Right, they don't close them, right? So they're still labeled active, right? Active investigations, which then prevents anyone from outside obtaining all of the records.
Right.
Oh
right.
yeah.
So even if like you wanted to really, in like research it, right? Like you're only able to get like only a handful of the records. You can't see everything because they label the cases as active and open, which then, right there, it's, they prevent you from looking further into it unless you have like an in, right? And someone's giving you records. But if you're doing it like just through public record requests, you're not going to get it, No. So
it's frustrating to say the least.
Yeah.
When we flew to Ohio to interview him on camera on death row, they were very generous and let us come into death row, the whole camera crew and all that. And, of course, I had him to admit on camera to me the murders and everything else, which I'd already known because I've been doing this with him for 16 years. But he had never admitted that in front of prison officials before. So the moment he did that, because these are not cold cases. These are new murders back in the day that he's never been charged with.
Okay.
So of course, then they had to lock him down, and State Patrol has to go in and investigate, which he's not talking to. And then Florida wants to come down and talk to him, but they still don't want to talk to me, and I have everything. I have everything in writing, his confessions, his maps, everything, to the point where I took even sketches of the victims. So everything that he's ever sent me is at my attorney's right now, just in case they wanted to try to pull some, subpoena out and say, hey, we want everything. Like, well, let's go to my attorney for that then. So
Yeah, but that's what they seem to do. I mean, you would think, the 2 years that I spoke with Ridgway, that the current detectives, right, in King County Sheriff's Office. I'm not talking about the retired,
Right.
members. I'm talking, the current ones. You would think that they would have been like, "Oh, let me talk to her. She spoke with him."
Right.
Just to see, like, is there
Right.
anything if we put our heads together?
Right.
Yeah.
Even a
Maybe,
phone call.
right? Like maybe we could find something out. But no, I mean they basically told me I was interfering in the investigation, right? But yet they have no problem taking information that I provided, because they did eventually go to the prison and they started to question him about this box, right? So they tell me I'm interfering in the investigation, but yet they take the information that I provided to them and they
Right.
they like use it as a lead, but yet they won't talk to me.
I get that all the time. Well,
So
I have never even gotten the courtesy of a phone call back or an email back.
oh, I'll get emails saying, it's an open investigation. We can talk to you. But yeah, I mean, it
And
takes a lot of persistence. I harass them basically.
Right. And I don't even think they need to provide you with the answer. I think they just need to sit down and listen to you and say,
Right.
like, and same thing with you, Bill. Like, okay, what has this guy told you? Oh, you've got sketches of the victims. Do you mind if we see those? You've got maps. Do
you
you
know,
mind if we
you would
take a
think,
look at that?
you would think
I
so.
mean, like
I mean,
Gary.
we had the one of the best cadaver dog handlers in the entire nation, who has been with us twice now, and had alerted right where the maps say, and to the point where he had to document it and give it to us to turn over to law enforcement, because he works with law enforcement, and he's like, at this point I have to turn this over to you guys to submit to them, and they still. I did an entire dossier for him, and I never offered to him. I offered them to say, "Hey, I'm here. Here's my contact information. If you need to get a hold of me to discuss this further." Nothing. Crickets. So
Yeah, I mean, that's been similar to my experience. And, Gary told me what was inside of this box, right? Like he gave me like a list. You would think they would want to know,
right,
or
right. Nope.
yeah.
And people had told me this many years ago, and I didn't believe them, because I'm like, who doesn't want to solve a cold case?
Right.
And then when it happened, years ago for the first time, I'm like, now I understand, and it's been that way ever since.
Right. And we ran into the same problem writing our book, where a lot of mistakes were made. Evidence was clearly lost. We found out after the case happened in 1973 in Asheville, the murder of Virginia Olson. I'll give myself a book plug here, A Murder on Campus, The Professor, the Cop, in North Carolina's most notorious cold case. I wrote that with my brother, but I experienced similar things where we actually had Virginia's roommate who we had contact with. They had never spoken with. We made contact with her boyfriend at the time, which he absolutely did not do it. But statistically, a spouse or a significant other is going to be, a high probability of someone being responsible. They hadn't spoken with them. Then they claimed that, or he claimed that he had never spoken to anyone from law enforcement. So I made contact with the detective and I said, hey, Jeff is saying he's never talked from anyone from Asheville or the SBI. He even thinks it's really weird. And this guy is a professor at Cornell, by the way. The boyfriend is now. So credible guy. All I asked for was a supplement to have Jeff's name on it, just to be able to prove that they in fact talked with him. So you can black out the entire sheet. I just want his name on a piece of paper to verify that you are telling the truth and that you've spoken with him. They wouldn't provide that, of course. The search warrant, they lost it. I knew that Asheville, they lost the public copy. They destroyed it at the clerk of courts. I asked the police department for a copy. Nope, we can't give you ours. Okay, this is a public document. Can I have the name on the warrant? Nope, we can't provide it. So I spent 6 months tracking it down and writing email after email and calling until finally I'm sure that they pressured the police department to get me a copy because it's now in our book.
Mm.
But yeah, I get the struggle of, and you know what's really crazy about this too is I worked in law enforcement.
Mm.
I thought that this was going to be a
walk in the park.
friendlier conversation, right? And I'll tell you something really laughable about this. When I was trying to make contacts to find someone in Asheville, because I thought that, like you were saying, Maria, it would be like, oh, you're one of us? Here's some stuff that's not public. I thought, this was going to be a very easy assignment. I started calling some agencies that were around there, and they were voluntarily providing me information about other cold cases and trying to encourage me to write a book on it. And one of them even invited me in the evidence room to look at some stuff. And so I do think it's a case-by-case basis when you're dealing with these departments. But unfortunately, I think that there is this trend of, we're not going to work with outsiders.
Yeah.
Right, but I mean, they're not going to work with outsiders, but they're not doing anything else like on their own, right? Like,
but here's the problem, and this is what I think what happened with our book is, the suspects were dead that we believe are responsible. John Rivas Jr. is the main one, and it doesn't benefit the department to make that claim because they can't support it. And then once they do that, they've got to open up the evidence for why they believe that he's responsible. And if you've lost that, like they lost the rape kit in the case and other evidence, then that comes out into light. And, that's not going to make people feel good.
Right.
And Gary Ridgway, it does not benefit the city to say, yeah, we've got these 40 unsolved murders that we've not done anything with because they're prostitutes and no one really cares about them. They didn't get a lot of media attention. So we're just going to ignore them and just move on with life.
Right. And I also think, it could be possible that they want to protect their own reputation. Right? Like they like to say, he killed 82 from 1982 to 1985. That's when he was most active. Oh, he didn't really kill, in the 90s, but
he didn't really kill. That's just a funny way to put it.
Right, but like
he only killed a few.
Okay, like he slowed down, which I think had a lot to do with age. I mean, by that point he was like getting into his 40s, but he didn't stop completely. And there were cases that I found like on that list, things that happened in the late 80s through the 90s. So it makes you wonder, right? Like, how much was he actually killing during that period? And, they prefer to say, oh, he wasn't really doing anything. Maybe there was another serial killer, right? Like that was something that they did also at the time. If you look at some of the media, right? Some of like the newspaper articles from that time, they do try to say that, oh, another serial killer could be responsible for these cases that look identical to his. And, it's kind of like, well, really? It's possible. I mean, I guess anything's possible, but at the end of the day, I mean, it was like they wanted to make it seem that the Green River Killer disappeared.
Right. What's better for them that way?
Exactly. But he didn't. And, he continued. I mean, even when he wasn't killing the woman, he was still trying to find women, right? Like he would, have sex with a lot of women that he didn't kill. So he was still actively seeing prostitutes. And so that makes me think if he was actively seeing prostitutes, right, like he had to have killed sometimes. Like you don't just stop, right? You don't just stop killing.
Right.
So.
And I 100% agree with you on that these people do not stop until they're caught or they're killed.
Or they die.
Yeah, or they die of old age. Which,
I mean, he told me that the only thing stopping him was that he was in prison.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's probably
the serial killer, same thing. Yeah, that whole myth out there, like, oh, they wanted to be caught. No, they didn't. All of my guys, and I can't tell you how many I've talked to, they'd still be doing it to this day if they could.
Be doing it. Yeah, he told me that.
Yeah,
you know, that he, you know, if he was out in the free world, he would probably end up killing again.
Sure.
And the only thing preventing him was because he was sitting in a cell behind bars and he couldn't. Right. And, you know, he agreed that he belonged to be in prison. Like that was something that he would tell me, I'm, you know, where I'm supposed to be. And I would say, yes, you know, you are.
Right.
But you know, he was able to acknowledge that, but still it's like, they don't stop. He compared it to like an addiction, right? Like it's something compulsive. So yeah, I mean, you know, the police, media, whoever, right, to run these narratives that, oh, they could stop, or, oh, like, you know, the narrative with Gary was, oh, he was married, happily married. Oh, love saved him. It's like, are you kidding me?
Right. That was his ruse to get away from it all. You know, he could blend in. He had a good job at the Kenworth factory. He was married, children. You know, that's why these serial killers get away with it, the good ones, for so long, because they do have a double life.
Exactly. But love didn't save him. Like you know, people say that, like, oh, he loved his wife and that's why he still killed. Like, really, it came down to like a matter of time and convenience, right? Like the fact that he had a wife to go home to, that did factor in, but not because he loved her so much, right? It was because he needed to make sure that she never became suspicious.
And if he killed her, the first person would be question would be him.
Exactly. So, that's why he never killed her, although he thought about it. And he admitted to that during his police interrogations, right? That he admitted to wanting to kill her. And, you know, he always stopped himself because he knew he had enough reason and sense to know the husband would be the first suspect, right? So, you know, he never killed her. However, you know, he tried to he tried to never give her a reason to doubt him or, you know, become too suspicious, even though there were a lot of red flags, in my opinion. But, you know, to each their own, right? But, you know, he would end up coming home the same time every day. Don't give her a reason to suspect him, right? But that doesn't mean he wasn't, you know, trying to find a woman, or that, you know, sometimes he would just have sex with them and realize, oh, I don't have time to kill her, right? So then that would be it, right? So a lot of it came down to time and convenience with him, not anything else.
Right.
And, you know, because you need a couple hours, right, to do what he was doing. So
fascinating.
Yeah.
It is fascinating. I love hearing these stories. I could just listen to them all day long. But if people want to hear more stories, you can buy Confessions of the Green River Killer again on July 21st. Bill, can you are you allowed to give us any update about what's going on with your show?
It's still ongoing. So,
I mean, you're working on something special that.
Yes. Hopefully it turns into the documentary or series that they've been pitching. And we've been filming for about a year and a half now, and getting some decent results out of what we've been filming. The directors, producers, all that in New York, they'll pitch it next month in April, and we will go from there. But stay tuned, I guess. That's all I can really say. They've really reined me in just in the last couple of weeks. So this will probably be like one of the last podcasts I can even do, because they don't want me on camera for anybody else or anything anymore until this is done. So
I feel special.
Yeah.
Well, you've been on here plenty of times, and I can I never get tired of listening to you speak and telling stories,
Oh, I enjoy it.
providing artwork. And so, yeah,
Well,
thank you for
we'll
that.
still stay in touch, and I'm certain I can let them or talk them into let me come back on. So, I mean, whenever you want to schedule, I'd love to have Maria back on again because I think there's so much I can learn from her even. So,
Oh, absolutely.
what the
Well,
all
Bill,
stay in
how
touch.
can we support you? I know we've got your book, Watch Me Die, Last Words from Death Row. You can get that on Amazon, Kindle, anywhere where you can buy a book.
Yeah.
What else can we do for you?
Now, if you want to follow me on Instagram or whatever, just look for my name and you'll see the cover of the book. The reason I tell people to do that because I'll post art on there periodically as it comes in, and even though I won't say who it's from, then people can send me a DM and say, hey, who's that from? And I'll say, oh, it's a Jesperson, or it's a Raider or whatever like that. I just don't like to publish it out there in public.
All right. Well, Maria, how can we support you besides getting Confessions of the Green River Killer? That's going to be out July 21st. It's on pre-order now.
Yes.
So you can go ahead and get your copy. I'll put a link in the description so to make it easy on everyone.
Yes.
But you've also got your website and you're on social media as well. Do you want to plug that?
So Beyond the Crime, that's my website. And you could also find me on Instagram under the same name, Beyond the Crime.
All right. Well, Maria and Bill, thank you so much for coming on.
Awesome.
If you want to support me, you can start off by liking and subscribing to Santana True Crime. You can also follow me on Instagram, TikTok, wherever you get your social media at Santana True Crime. And you can buy my book, A Murder on Campus, A Professor, the Cop, in North Carolina's Most Notorious Cold Case. I wrote that with my brother, Dr. Brian Santana. Bill and Maria, thank you again, and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.